Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. Great show tonight. In the first hour, we're going to be speaking with Meg Blackburn Losey about her new book, The Children of Now, Evolution. And in the second hour with Ed Nightingale about the Giza template. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, where you can find out about all the products and services I offer, including medical intuition evaluations, energy healings, and psychic readings. So if there's stuff going on in your life, give me a call, send me an email. We can set up a time for a private consultation. It's also brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics, where you can jumpstart your intuition today with their brand new and improved 50-page guide. You can get that at www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. Oh, did I say that's free? It's free. I wanted to let everyone know we've had such great success with the digital download of Icon, Deconstructing the Archetypes of the Ancients, on Amazon, that we've decided to go to press with it and are going to be producing actual DVDs for purchase. So you are the first to know that that will be coming out in the next couple of weeks. And actually, I'm planning on setting up a page on the Just Energy Radio site where if you want to pre-order a copy, we'll have some kind of special deal for pre-orders. Anyway, now if I stop playing with my webpage, it would be a whole lot better. Okay, let me tell you about Meg and get her on the air. Dr. Meg Blackburn Losey is the author of 9 books, including her new book, The Children of Now, Evolution. She is a national and international keynote speaker and also lectures worldwide. She facilitates groups' journeys to sacred sites, including Scotland, England, Ireland, Peru, Bolivia, Egypt, and Mexico. She is a recipient of the Culture of Peace Award. Dr. Meg has also served as a consultant to Good Morning America in 2020 and most recently A&E Lifetime Movie Network. Webpage is spiritlight.com, and the book we're going to be talking about is The Children of Now, Evolution. So please welcome to Just Energy Radio, Meg Blackburn Losey. Hey, Dr. Meg, how are you doing?
Hey, Dr. Rita, thanks for having me on, and hi to all of you who are listening now or maybe later.
That's right. We like the maybe later part. Meg, why did you decide to write this new book, The Children of Now, Evolution?
You know, it's a really funny thing. In 2006-ish, I forget what year, I've got quite a few out. I put out a little book called The Children of Now, and I wrote it. I was very excited, and I was seeing some amazing things in my practice with kids. And then children started talking to me telepathically, and that was a whole nother weirdness. And I wrote about them because I wanted to create an awareness that something different was happening in our new generation. But I had no idea what a big phenomenon it was and how many different aspects of everyday life it includes. So The Children of Now Evolution is a follow-up to that, but it's a very different kind of book. it's a book of answers. And what I like to say is, it's not just a new book, it's a wake-up call. And I got asked, as I got out and started talking to audiences, parents, teachers, doctors, you name it, they asked me questions that were really big and totally outside of my arena, and I couldn't figure out how in the world those questions applied to what I was seeing. And so I stood back over the years, and I took an eagle-eye view, and I started to realize that, oh my God, not only are these things connected, they're causal to a lot of what we're seeing, and now we're seeing social symptoms of the unintentional abuse that we've been giving these kids. I call it abuse by ignorance. So that's
let me just interrupt you real quick here. What kind of questions were they asking you?
They asked me particularly about vaccines, about the effects of GMOs on their children, and about gluten sensitivities. They asked me about the different technologies and how they were affecting the kids. I mean, it was the gamut, and it was all a lot bigger than my experience. So what I did was I started to learn about these things, and I started to put the pieces together. And it's a scary-looking puzzle, but it doesn't have to be, And that's why I wrote this book. I wanted to give people the answers that I wasn't able to give to them at the time they had the questions, and I wanted to be able to have those answers so fully researched, so complete, and so truthful that people can really decide for themselves how they feel on the different subjects. But I also started seeing things that are pretty scary, like how desensitized children are getting because of our technologies. Our psychology has been outgrown by our technology. And because of that, children are not learning like we did. I mean, if you and I have been friends for 20 years, we're going to pick up the phone and we're going to pick up right where we left off. And we're going to trust each other no matter what. The kids are not learning that. What they're learning is how to deal behind texts, behind emails, behind apps where they can post something that disappears in 5 seconds. They're playing video games that are very real, and those are all of these things and others are playing on their psychologies to the point where some children don't even understand that dead is dead, or that when people bleed, they're really hurt. And we're socially seeing, unfortunately, events that are perpetrated by children that are pretty awful. And we're also seeing it in our police officers shooting innocent people, shooting unarmed people, different things. We're starting to see societally what this desensitization is doing to our psychologies. So my point is, we've got to get back to really deep interpersonal relationships. We've got to get into deep communication with our children. We've got to be able to know ourselves and be okay with whatever that is, so that we give our children a really good example of what healthy being looks like. Because we're too fast, we're too furious. It's hard to survive in this world. A lot of parents are working way too many jobs. And one of the stats that I ran across was just mind-blowing to me, that the average parent only spends 28 minutes a day with their child because of all the activities and work and everything else. And so the children are not getting a lot of structure or guidance like we did. And that part is really important. Children need that to feel safe, so they know what's next, so they know what's expected. I'm talking loose structure. There's always got to be room to be flexible, but we're seeing a lot of kids that are growing up way too fast because they're on their own and they have to, and they're exposed to a lot of things that their parents don't even know about. So this is one of the social factors that I ran into as I was researching this whole picture, because it's not just a few very cool kids with different abilities. It's a whole generation we're talking about here. And it doesn't matter if they show signs of intuitive nature or, other interesting things like that. What matters is how are they going to turn out when they're running our world? And how are we abusing them out of ignorance because we're, for instance, putting them in school systems with curriculums that are over 100 years old. Well, 100 years ago, we didn't have any of what we have now. Every day was about how am I going to survive? How am I going to get my dinner? And, how am I going to feed my family kind of thing? And the kids are still expected to behave the same way, but they're not. They can't. And that's because they're different. We, people like us, the bridge generation, who explored our intuitive nature, actually stepped into it in many cases, paved the way for this new generation to be born with these natural abilities intact and functional, and it's their norm. Many of us had to work at it because we didn't understand it. And I'm not talking about religion. I'm not talking about spirituality. I'm talking about human being. And there are parts of us we don't even know what they do yet. We only use about 7 to 10% of our brains. We're only aware of 10% of everything that's happening around us. And so our children are using not only their 5 senses, but they're what I call sentient. They're higher frequency. They're less dense than we are in the construct way beyond quantum physics. They are high frequency children. Each of us is a symphony of energy that comes together to reflect us as individuals, and there are no duplicates in all of creation. And so each of us is wired a little differently. And the children are wired, their symphonies are all celestial notes. They're just way up there. And energetically, that makes them different, that makes them more sensitive. And modern medicine does not even consider that we have a subtle energy field or an etheric anatomy, or that any of that applies to what's going on with the kids. But because they are so sensitive, I call them sentient, they gather information with their entire being, with their whole bodies, not just their brains. And their minds are compartmentalized. All of that information just kind of gets filed away automatically in different parts of their brain. They're using more of their brain than we do. And then when all of those fractals come together to make a whole story, the child will spit out the most remarkable deep knowledge about things, whether it has to do with being on Earth or things they remember before they came or whatever. But they get oversensitized. They get overstimulated. And when they do, they have to move around and shake it off. Some of us, we get in a crowd and we have to move around. Standing near a couple of people in those conversations for too long at a time, we start to feel antsy inside. We start to feel like this buildup of, it's too much, they're in my space. And so we move and we go talk to somebody else or we go take a minute, And that's what the kids do. And all they're doing is shaking off what they're picking up from everyone and everything around them. But yet, no one ever asks them, how was your day? What did you learn? What did you notice? Who was doing what? How was the teacher today? There's none of that. Instead, they're being put labels on of attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactive disorder, bipolar, blanket diagnosis, just like fibromyalgia. These are blanket diagnoses because they don't know how to control the children because they're different. And I say it's we that need to learn how to behave differently, not them. They're showing us a different way of being because it's very natural for them. And we're saying something's wrong with them. When they're perfectly fine, they're not broken, they're just differently abled.
But don't you think that the food, you mentioned the foods we eat, the GMOs, the chemicals, the processed foods, the sugar, the interaction with technology and the EMF radiation that comes off of that, and just, being one with your computer or tablet, don't you think that those things also interfere with like our energy field, making it so that we're going to not be grounded in our body either?
That's exactly true. Go into any restaurant, any restaurant where families eat, and look around, and what you're going to see is everybody at the table, mom, dad, and all the kids, are going to be messing with their gadgets and not even conversing with each other. They might text each other during dinner, but I see that a lot. And I think, wow, what if they had a conversation? What if they looked each other in the eyes? What if they left those things home? And what if they were able to feel safe and okay about speaking what's in their heart or in their experience for the day? You know, these things are taking that away. And you're right, they do sap our energy, and they do actually change our energy fields. I'm weird, I can see this stuff. And a lot of times electromagnetic exposure will cause things in our field that actually interrupt our field communication, so that we're not getting all of our information or fully or correctly, and or parts of the information are missing because something's rerouting it. And we don't realize how much we depend on that autopilot part of ourselves that helps keep us safe, defends us, and teaches us as well, you know, gives us what we need right in the right minute. And we've all done it, you know. And a good example is we might be talking with someone, and we give them the most brilliant advice on the planet. And then later we sit back and say, how the heck did I know to do that? Where did that come from? You know, we're absorbing it. It's there. And when we get into a certain state of relaxation, a certain state of being what I call undefended, then that natural part of our nature can come forward very easily, because there's a key here. Our minds, our brains, are electrical in nature. They have certain pathways that actually can redevelop based on our experiences. We can teach our brain to do different things. And then there's consciousness, which is electromagnetic in nature. It's very fine, and it's faster than the speed of light, and it's not bound to any time or space or boundaries. And our consciousness is what makes us vital. It's what makes us alive, because it fills every cell as we grow in utero. So our consciousness is directly connected to everything, and what I call the common consciousness. And we are actually able to reach out there, intentionally or otherwise, and pick up exactly what we need in any given moment, as long as we're not so tense that we're so defended that we can't get there. You know, when our brains are firing too much, we're not able to get to our higher conscious states. I've got years and years of working with this, and the best thing that I can tell you is people that are really mentally oriented have the hardest time, because their brains are firing, and when the electrical system is firing like that, literally firing, little charges passing from one nerve ending to another, they're called axioms. And when that happens, it creates this little field of electrical energy. And that literally closes the door to our finer abilities, our higher awareness that is pure consciousness. The kids don't have that interrupt. They have everything going simultaneously.
That just seems like a lot of energy and information to process all at one time.
Yeah, it is. And the problem is that, excuse me, the children don't know that it's not all theirs. They might be I did a really cute chapter in the book about a hypothetical child in class. And I kind of went through his day with him. And his teacher had a fight with her boyfriend that morning, and he was picking up on her. And another child had gotten in big trouble and was really mad, and he was feeling that. And a little girl in class was having things happen at home that nobody talks about. And he just couldn't sit still. He was moving around because he was feeling all of these feelings, and all of this stuff was happening. There's a lot of examples in the book. And he was constantly in trouble because he couldn't sit still. And he didn't realize that they were not his feelings. He didn't know where they were coming from. It was very confusing for him. And so one of the first things that I teach parents to teach these kids is how to discern what's theirs and what's not. And the way that I do that is I use the example of witnessing a conversation across the room. You're standing there, they're talking a little louder than they probably should be, and you hear every word. It's not about you, and there's nothing you should do about it. Well, feelings are the same way. The children feel other people's feelings. They actually know whether they're telling the truth or not, other people. And they take it all on themselves, and they feel responsible for it. So I teach them by using that example to do that with feelings and say, I'm feeling really good right now, and all of a sudden everything inside of me changes. What's causing that? Is this me, or is it something else? And I teach them how to identify their feelings as opposed to the empathic input. And when they learn how to do that, they no longer start carrying around everybody else's stuff and trying to be responsible for it. They understand that people are having experiences, but that they don't have to own any of that. And it really, really helps them have a better self-image, because a lot of those unknown feelings make them feel really bad and kind of helpless, and then they start to feel bad about themselves, and then they stop talking about things. And that's when we that's when we start having real trouble. So I'm all about helping them discern what's going on inside of them. And every one of them's different. Some are more sensitive than others, some are more aware than others. And so it depends on the child. But that's a really important tool to give them.
Yeah, because when we take on other people's stuff, we just think that it's ours and we have to solve the problem, or we have to feel the feelings that aren't even our feelings. And then we don't even know what's going on because we didn't feel that way. But now we do, but we don't really understand why. And then when you ask, well, why do you feel that way? Well, I don't know. And they think you're lying.
Exactly. And they feel it just as if the other person is feeling it. They identically. And that's called being empathic. But it's more than that, because they're picking up with their entire being, their whole energy field, their whole body. And when that happens, it builds up and they get overloaded. And, they're also very sensitive to visual clutter and aural clutter, noise, and crowds. Sometimes kids act up. Why is that? Well, they got too much input. Let's give them a little break. Take them outside for a minute, whatever it takes. But this is really affecting this entire generation. I'm not talking about just a specific group of kids. This is across the board, and this is part of what I didn't realize early on. I thought we had a special little niche going on. And what I realized is that what's happening is we're in a fast-forward evolution of humanity, a fast-forward evolution of consciousness. Our bodies are having to mutate to keep up with the kind of things that we've been eating without realizing it, and how they're processing those things. And there's just so many changes. And the really cool thing is, right now, we have in our charge the most intelligent, brilliant, sensitive generation of human beings that's ever been on this earth. And they have needs that we're not meeting.
And so, you're making this comment, and in your book you talk about like indigos and crystalline and star children and transitional children. So you're not just talking about them in particular, you're talking about this whole group. Let me ask a different question. How old or how far back do you feel this shift has really taken place? Like, you know, 20-year-old and forward, you know, and younger, or more recent than that?
It really started with us, with the generation before the children. And a lot of people say, oh, we're waking up. We're not waking up. We're starting to remember what we've always been. And a lot of us explored that, so we opened a lot of doors. And now we have this generation of children who, like I said earlier, has all this naturally to varying degrees. And so, you know, when I wrote the first book, I had two practices, same thing, two different locations. And I started having parents bring in children that they thought were broken. They weren't doing well in school, you know, and I'd start talking to these kids, and they were amazing. They were brilliant. They, you know, and I even said to one little 9-year-old, he was still one of my favorites to this day, came to see me in red seat pajamas with this big book about airplanes, and I was looking for an in with him, you know, and I said, oh, my dad flew in the Air Force. And he said, when was that? And I said, well, this is when. And he says, well, your father flew. And then he started to tell me all of the hydraulics, all of the way the plane was made, how it worked, how much fuel it took, how far it could fly. Unbelievable. And I'm talking to this little guy, and I said, you know, your mom brought you here because you're not doing really well in school, and you seem pretty brilliant to me. What's up? And he said, well, I'll tell you what's up. He said, this is the God's honest truth. I'll tell you what's up. He says, I am made to sit there and listen to one word at a time until I am bored out of my mind. And then a few weeks later or a month later, I'm expected to pass some test so that I fit in some category for the school system or whoever else is involved. And he said, quite frankly, by then, I'm light years ahead. And there is no need whatsoever for me to go backwards and prove anything. All they have to do is ask if they want to know. And I started laughing, and I looked at his mom, and I said, Mom, what you need to do is feed this kid's head. You know, he was what I called the star kid, one of the star kids, and they're very technologically oriented, very earth oriented. And but to answer your question, the reason that I gave them different names was because I was just trying to be able to communicate and identify what I was communicating about. I never in the world meant to create labels. But here goes. The bridge generation being us, then in the and so that is before the 1980s. Then in the 1980s, we started getting the Crystalline kids, and they were the paradigm busters. They were the ones that did not follow people's rules because they were made for their other people's convenience. They were laid back, did what they wanted, and very artful, musically oriented, you know, and just didn't really care a whole lot about everybody's format. And so after that, we had a bit of a break, and we saw a group of kids that had kind of mixed energies. I call them the transitional kids, although we still have them today. And then almost simultaneously in the late 90s, we started to see the Crystalline Children and the Star Children. There's a difference between the two. There's a large difference between the two. The Crystalline Children are very heart-centered. Many of them, the earlier ones that came in, said, you know, I came back here because I want to teach you how to love yourselves and each other because you don't remember. You don't remember how. And I picked you as a parent because I knew that you would support me in what I'm here to do. Or, you know, that varied depending on the situation. And they're very socially oriented. They act, by the time they're 10 or 11, they do things like food drives so everybody in school has the same healthy meal. They do things like make jewelry or bracelets to raise money for studying pancreatic cancer because they don't know a lot about it. They pitch tents and protests along the river in France and call themselves the Children of Quixote. And what they were protesting was that there were too many homeless people in their village, and they didn't think it was right. I could go on and on. But that's what the Crystalline Children do as they start getting older. They start acting, and they stand up, and they act, and they are a force. And they're great little managers. The Star Kids are really, really about the planet. They're about the animals and the health of the planet, because some of them can even feel where the earth is not real healthy, where things have been done, where they're toxins or whatever. And they're very technologically oriented, and they really are deeply all about animals. They love animals. And so we have a perfect setup here. They're the two biggest groups. The other ones are all kind of starters and minor groups. You know, these are the two major groups and the most popular of all, you know, of the populace. And it's a perfect yin and yang. You've got people who are socially conscious, who are heart-centered and all about equanimity. And you've got a group of kids that's all about the planet and creating new technologies and making sure the animals have what they need. You put those two together as adults, and we have the opportunity to see vast change in our world where the truth is evident and everyone has what they need, because we will share our resources, because they'll make sure that we do instead of using them as leverage. And they're going to change the planet in ways that we can't even imagine. You know, the last chapter of the book is my view of, because I've known so many of these kids, is my view of what they can accomplish. And all they need is our support. And the way that we support them is by becoming aware and giving them what they need, not putting them on a pedestal and not putting them down. You know, when a child says to you, I remember talking to God, and I remember choosing to come here and picking you to be my mom and dad, they're telling the truth. Or when they say, I see angels, and their parents say, oh, no, you don't. Because it gets somehow smeared in with religion, and it isn't anything close to that.
But I feel like that whole concept has really changed from when you and I were young, where they would tell you you're crazy.
Yeah.
Now there are so many more people that are remotely open, or I mean, I get calls from parents going, you know, my daughter says she sees, you know, the monster in the closet and it scares her, or she said, you know, and they're at least asking the questions with the possibility, could this be true? And my kid's not crazy?
It is true. And here's why. The children, because of the way they're put together energetically, they kind of emit a certain different kind of set of frequencies than we do. And I don't know your audience, but I'm just going to go there.
Oh, just go there. They're cool.
Okay, there are realities far beyond this one, where other beings live, and they look different, and they look like us, and they look like everything in between. And they're kind of like, these kids are kind of like a beacon. And many other beings in other dimensions are very curious about what these children are emitting. This is very special and never happened before. So they come at night when the children are asleep, and they watch them. They don't touch them. They don't speak to them. They don't hurt them. They would never hurt them. And the kids can see them. And some of them are kind of scary looking. And then we have people in the spirit world that realize the children can hear them, or that are part of the family that's passed over, and they come and talk to the children. Or somebody that passed away nearby, and there's a great story. There was actually a TV segment about it, about a little girl who used to go out and sit on her swing, and this guy named George would come and talk to her every day. And they found out that George was the neighbor and he had died. And the reason that they knew that was because somebody from the neighborhood brought a bunch of old pictures over, and she was showing them to the little girl's mother, and the little girl says, well, that's George right there. And they said, you're kidding. no, that's George. That's who comes every day. And George has been dead for like decades. And so they can see them, they can talk to them. They have this openness that we learned how to close early on. And
some of us.
Some of us, yeah, some of us got back here. And they're afraid when they see people standing at the end of their bed. They don't know what they want. They don't know if it's okay. They're told, don't talk to strangers. And here they are in the middle of the night, and they're talking to them. So I encourage parents to say, ask questions. Did they say anything? Well, did you ask them why they came? Well, what did they say? And a lot of times there's just a message that needs to get across, or they're so happy that somebody can see and hear them because they haven't quite finished crossing over yet. There's a lot of variations to the stories, but and imaginary friends are often quite real, and they do see them and they do hold their hands, and and they do play together. And we are not used to that kind of openness of reality, and it freaks a lot of people out. And what is different from a lot of different religious dogma over the years has become a scary thing. And this whole phenomenon's gotten tangled up with some of that, and it makes me very sad. I was at a party for somebody deep in Georgia, I'll say. And
they don't have chakras down here, so I'm in Texas. They don't have chakras down here.
I have a lot of good Texan friends, but I walked in and I was very late because I had been working with families and stuff all day, and there was one chair way in the back in an enclosed porch, and 4 seats from me was an older woman, obviously grandmother, holding the most gorgeous little baby girl you ever saw in your life. She had light brown hair and crystal blue eyes. Well, she and I started talking to each other, and it looked like we were just staring because we were telepathing. And her grandmother turns to me, and she says very indignantly, whatever the little girl's name was, hasn't learned that it's not polite to stare at each other. And she turns away and pulls the baby away from my sight. And it was just like, wow, I could not believe she's holding in her arms a gift from the heavens, and she's chastising me for being able to communicate. She had no idea what was going on. And I see that a lot, particularly in the beginning. More now, people are a little more open to strange things, but,
let me ask you this question.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so we're talking about this new vibration, this new evolution of children that are coming through. Mm-hmm. But are we talking about an evolution of existing souls that are manifesting on the earth plane, or are we talking about new energy that's coming from somewhere else and manifesting on the earth plane?
It's a great question, Dr. Rita, and it's a combination. These kids that we've been talking about for much of the time are old souls, and they've come back. They're little masters, and they've come back to bring that mastery back to us. And because it's such an exciting time on our planet, we're getting a lot of new souls that have no experience whatsoever, and it's quite interesting to watch them find their way through and wind their way into their humanity. And it's kind of like for a while we had a big rush of souls coming because they could at a time that's very interesting and exciting. Some of those belong here now. Some of them just got excited and came anyway. And so it's a real mix. And at the same time, we have shifted energetically on this planet since about 2009. Certain multidimensional or intradimensional events happened that opened corridors that allowed rushes of energy to come through us that we haven't had in millennia. And those rushes of energy actually retuned us rearranged our particulates, as I like to call it, all the little teeny pieces we're made of. And we basically, essentially got energetically rewired. And so there's that piece going on. It's a really exciting time because there's so much change, and it's affecting our children, our next generation. It's affecting us, and it's even affecting people that are older. They're starting to catch on as well, and they came from an even more rigid generation than we did. And so it's really fun to sit back and ponder on, wow, look at this. Look how fast it's moving. Look at the possibilities and the potential that we have to work with to make really good, positive changes. But the problem is most of the populace is not aware that any of this is even going on. So what I say is, if we can learn to become happy and healthy adults and give the kids great examples and supports the nature, the true nature of their being, and not be afraid of it, but be curious instead, we can really contribute to a very healthy upcoming adult generation.
So there was a comment in the chat room from Redshift that I asked him to rephrase it into a question, which he didn't do. But I thought it was a very interesting comment. I would like for you to respond to what he has to say, true or false or whatever. And so it says, the problem I see with upcoming generations is that for all the new talent we see arising, there's an equal amount of negative/bad kinds for kids following suit. What do you say to that comment?
You know what? That's a really good point, and I'll tell you.
And that's why I was like, you know what? I got to ask that question. At least bring it up, because it was a really good point.
Yeah, I'll tell you why it's happening. When so much light becomes present, and it expands exponentially. Anytime any of us get together and we talk about this, we act on it, we do things about it, it grows in the consciousness. And there is a constant need in creation. And when I say creation, I mean everything. I'm not talking parallel realities. I'm not talking, other dimensions. I mean literally everything included, okay? There's always a rising. You can tell when there is a rising of light and a change and an evolution in how much light is being used on the planet by how much oppositional force raises its head. Because there is a natural need for creation to seek its own balance. We are made of both things. We are made of lightness and darkness. And what's really cool is if you go through lightness and you go through this void and you go into darkness, you go into another void and you go back into the light. It's toroid in nature. If anybody knows sacred geometry, look at a torus. That's what everything does. That's how all energy flows. And it does it in a spiral form, and it has polarities. And so when nature, I don't know what to call it, sometimes there's just no vocabulary for this. But when you see an uprising, first of all, we don't have to like it. But second of all, I celebrate. We are making a difference. They are rising up and trying to stop this. I say, be who you are, be in integrity, be in truth, and don't let that bother you. How can we be a part of the cure rather than a part of the opposition? So I hope that answers your question well enough. If I had more time, I'd go very deeply into that for you.
No, that was a great answer to that question. One of the things that, all right, hang on a second, because there was some great information, and, so I have to kind of go through my little list here and go, which are more important. I don't know. I keep coming back to this. But in your book, you talked about oral dynamics of autism.
Mm-hmm.
And can you just talk about, what is that, and just, some of the information that you found?
I would be delighted.
Because I thought that was very interesting. And I think, I think that there are so many kids that have some level of autistic spectrum disorder.
1 out of 50 children are being diagnosed with autism, and 80% of those are boys. Is that scary or what?
That is scary.
Okay, so here's what's going on. First of all, we have environmental toxins that we as adults are picking up, or heavy metal poisoning. There's mercury. There's a lot of corporate waste that's dumped illegally, or was done so before we knew better in some cases. And so there's that affecting us. And then when the children are made to have, notice how I state that, their vaccinations, the vaccines over years have had different carriers for the good stuff. To me, vaccines are great. However, they've been putting things like mercury, thimerosal, aluminum, different things like that into the vaccines and shooting them into these tiny, high-frequency little bodies whose subtle energy is very fragile. So I'll just use mercury as an example. It's been studied for use as fuel for interstellar travel. It's very potent stuff. and you take that and you mix it in a vaccine and you shoot that into a baby's body. And that mercury carries the vaccine through the body, and of course it's toxic as hell. And what it does is it's conductive. It expands the child's natural subtle energy field. In fact, their entire consciousness, which had seeded in the body when they were growing, in utero. And so the consciousness that makes that child vital, makes it a living thing, is pushed outward from the body in an irregular fashion, depending on how fine a frequency the child has. And so some children, their consciousness is pushed out kind of sideways or in a kind of a bumpy way, and other children, the conductive material pushes their consciousness completely away from their body, creating a gap between consciousness and the third-dimensional beingness. And there are many variances of that. And what I did was my very best, because I see this, and I illustrated it in the book to show why we have such a wide spectrum of autism. Autism is nothing more than consciousness being messed with chemically, with heavy metals, with toxins, whatever, and affecting the children. There are studies that are showing that at age 3 months and at age 18 months, these are when some of the worst events happen. I have witnessed this time and again, personally, that a child will be born normal. They'll have vaccines, and by the time they get home, they're on the floor flopping with seizures, or they start running a really, really dangerous high temperature of like 106, because what's in the vaccines is doing other things to the physical body, and the physical body starts to get too hot. And I see them start to show ritualistic behaviors. I see them start to show autistic behaviors, and those vary depending on the level of effectiveness. And then we have the opposite situation where we have Asperger's, which is very brainy. It's kind of like talking to Dr. Spock. It's so cool to talk to somebody who's very high-functioning Asperger's, because they're so logical. But they don't have any of the emotional recognition. They don't recognize facial expressions. They don't understand emotions and what their words do to people. It's the complete opposite effect of autism, but it's part of the same spectrum because it's relative to the same causes from what my research shows. So that's kind of like how it's happening. And what are we doing? We're giving them boatloads of vaccines at a time. And so a lot of parents are saying no, which is, in a way, it's super. They're taking a stand, and that's important. But not vaccinating children is not good either, because we're starting to see, we saw recently an outbreak of measles from Disneyland. We saw an outbreak of mumps, I believe it was in the Northeast. Those are social signs that are saying, uh-oh, we got a problem. But there are places you can call. Well, first of all, you can call your doctor's office. You can get the batch number of the vaccines that your child will be receiving. And there's an 800 number. There are actually several. I published one in the book. And you can call that number, and you can say, could you please list the ingredients in this vaccine? And are there any heavy metals? Are there any kind of corporate waste, whatever? You can ask however you want. And they have to tell you what's in them. And you can discern for yourself, is this vaccine good for my child? No? Okay, I'm going to find one that is. But
aren't all vaccines created alike?
No, they're not. And what happened was, supposedly they outlawed mercury. And you know what happened to all of those leftover vaccines that had mercury in them?
They sent them to third world countries?
You got it.
See how smart I can be sometimes?
You are amazing. You're amazing. I think I would really like to talk to you deeply sometime. I think we have a good time. Anyway, so they didn't destroy what they knew was causing this. They passed it along to people who had no money for anything else. I see it a lot, and because I travel all over the world, and I talk to the kids, and I play with them, and I talk to their parents, and whenever I can, language-wise, and I see the differences. And just in the time that I've been taking groups around the world and taking myself around to speak and that kind of thing, I've noticed big changes in a lot of the children, and it's frightening. It's absolutely frightening. And all we have to do is stand up and make a difference. Stop letting the auspices tell us what our child needs and what's best for it. Start saying no. Start asking questions, and stand up for your child. They're your child. They don't belong to anybody else, and they don't have to fit a certain way. And what a lot of parents have taken kids out of school and they're homeschooling. And what I thought was really cool was when that happened, the next thing that happened was it naturally developed a thing where the families that were homeschooling started to get together and going on picnics and doing nature things, going on field trips. So they were getting socialized, and they were getting it healthily. And there are a lot of ways that we can do things like that that really give our children a well-rounded, holistic way of being, rather than us just letting society tell us what they should do and make them feel like crap about themselves,
What about amazing. Kind of in the same vein, the whole concept of discipline and having, expectations of your child, because it seems like that's another, I'm going to say, huge epidemic in the role, in the whole family dynamics. I mean, you see these parents that, all right, I like Starbucks. I don't drink coffee, but I like tea. I like my Starbucks. And I would see these kids going in there with their parents and getting like a coffee frappuccino at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, and pedicures.
And they're like 8 years old. Yeah. I can't even drink one because there's too much sugar, and I don't even do coffee kind. I've drank one, and I was so wired up, and every sip I could just feel it going into my blood, going, woo, you're going to have like this total sugar buzz by the time you're done with this, which I thought I should throw it away. But, I was going for the little high feeling. But anyway, and I would just want to go and smack the parents. I mean, what is going on with that whole thing?
Our value system is really corrupted. Here's the situation. Because of all of how fast everything started moving, how the economy tanked a while back, how many parents are working more than one job or way too many hours. They're trying to make up to their children by letting them feel special in those kind of ways that you described. But at the same time, I lost my train of thought. At the same time, what happened is they started to feel empty. They started to fill that emptiness with things and stuff. And they lost that sense of their own sacredness. They lost that sense of their connection to the divine. And it's not a dichotomy. We are a marriage of humanity and divinity. We are literally hardwired through our DNA to seek our divinity, to seek home. And that is fact. And what happened is people got to a certain age. Here's what happened. People in our generation were told to do harder, try better, get better grades, find the purpose in life that's ours, and make a difference in the world. But guess what? Nobody ever told us what that looked like. And everybody grew up, and all of a sudden a lot of people are flailing, and they're miserable, and they're uncomfortable, and they're trying to feel better. And so that turns into achieving and success. And achieving and success turns into it's all external. So we lose track of our inside. We don't know who we are anymore. And so we try to fill that with things and stuff, and we compete with each other. I see that a lot in big cities. And that's what happened. We lost touch with that. That's what the children are bringing us back to. And that's a beautiful thing. And I said that. I predicted that years and years ago, nearly a decade ago. I said, here's what's going to happen. Here's what everybody's doing. Here's what's going on. It's all external. The big house, the nice car, the big boat, whatever. The designer clothes, whatever. And they're pretty soon going to start feeling really empty. And when they do, they're going to start grasping for anything. So what happened is, societally, they got very competitive. And I know from firsthand experience, in certain cities, it's worse in the cities because people are more compacted together, that if you correct your child in public, like in Walmart, like you asked, what happens is somebody picks up the phone, because everybody has one, and they report you for child abuse. And things like that happen every day. And that child deserved it. I mean, that child needed discipline. And we're seeing a lot of,
Our time is up.
Oh, no.
I'm like looking, going, wait. I don't want you to stop, but the music's going to roll in like 1 minute unless it's already, 1 minute. You got 1 minute. Your new book, The Children of Now, Evolution, where can they get it? How can they contact you? 1 minute. It's
everywhere. Amazon's got a great price on it. It's online at all your favorite bookstores. It's in your favorite bookstores. My website, my main one is spiritlight.com. Lots of free stuff on there. It has my schedule. Check it out because it's changing all the time. And my other website is touchingthelight.org. I teach a year-long certification class in the Touching the Light healing work that I do that got me to where I'm talking about today. So you might be interested in checking that out. And I also have a number of journeys coming up. Alaska in June, Scotland in July, Hawaii conference in March of next year, and I forgot something, Peru in October. So I stay really busy. I don't like being bored. And I like getting around the world and seeing what's happening and keeping my fingers on the pulse. So that's the best way to get me. My email is drmeg, Dr. Meg, no dot or anything, at spiritlight.com. And
all right.
How was that for keeping it under a minute?
Perfect. All right, Dr. Meg, so I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book. It was great.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right. Good night. That's Dr. Meg Blackburn Losey.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.